And usually we have introductions, which we are going to bypass for the time being, because we have a presentation that might last an hour. So what do you call your project? There's different names.
You can call it whatever you want, but Montevilla Historic Resource Survey works.
The Montevilla Historic Survey. And our time includes question and answer after his presentation. And then we scheduled an open forum. Usually, we'll sometimes take questions during or comments during a board meeting. We're going to start the board meeting with any comments or questions we have. And then we're going to kind of adjust the way we do the nominations in that we'll probably ask you to, if you want to be on the board or think you want to be on the board, just submit to us an email and we'll put together the questions that we need answered and take that up at the next meeting.
Or feel free to talk to us in person after the meeting.
Yeah, after the meeting, yeah. Okay, you're all. Thank you, guys.
Marty to talk, and I know she had a quick update to give before I talk tonight.
Thanks, Brandon. My name is Marty Stockton. I'm the Southeast District Planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I'm not on the agenda tonight. I'm here actually to support my colleague in his presentation. But I wanted to give just a quick announcement that in December, right before the holidays, the 82nd Avenue study, Understanding Barriers to Development, was publicly released and posted online. I have reached out to my contact on the Montevilla Neighborhood Association to say that I'd be happy to come back in February to give more of a presentation and update on that. But because it's been publicly released in December, I wanted to come here personally and let you know that it is available for your review. And that's it. So, thanks.
And then we're also going to post the link on the website about the 82nd project and the historical resource survey.
Well, thank you everybody for having me tonight. My name is Brandon Spencer-Hartle. I'm one of Marty's colleagues at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And in my day-to-day role, I serve as the city's Historic Resources Program Manager. So I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a minute. But I just wanted to acknowledge that there are potentially a variety of people here tonight who are maybe not usual suspects at these meetings. We have some University of Oregon graduate students who are here as part of this project that I'll sort of introduce by blanket hand wave later. We also did invite to this meeting all of the property owners and business owners in the area that we will be working on in the next 6 or so months. And so I'm curious if anybody did receive a letter from the city or are here tonight because you received a letter. Great, I'm glad you got the letter, made it. So I'm going to talk both specifically to what this project means for those people who either own property or own or manage business in the survey area, and then also what it means for the broader Montevilla community and the neighborhood associations as well. So to dig in a little bit, I plan to talk for about 20 minutes or a half an hour about what it is that we're setting out to do, why we're doing it, what it means, talk a little bit about concerns people might have about regulation or interest people have in where it goes from here. And then at the end of my talk, I'll invite 2 of my colleagues who are helping with the project to add any additional context, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion and make sure everyone leaves the room tonight feeling like they have a pretty good understanding of what's going on and what it means. So I mentioned earlier, I come here from Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. The Bureau of Planning and Sustainability's Historic Resources Program has not, in recent years, been all that involved here in Montevilla. So while we've worked closely with some neighborhood associations like Irvington or Kenton, Eastmoreland, and Laurelhurst, I'm a little bit new to your neighborhood association in this role, so I want to introduce you to what we do just so you have a little better sense of it. So we manage maps and public information about the city's historic resources. We have about 20,000 buildings in the city of Portland that are either in historic districts or that have been designated as landmarks or documented as potentially significant places. So there are a lot of places in the city that we've identified or worked with as historic. There's also a lot of places that haven't yet been documented or identified as being historic, even though they might have significance. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight as it pertains to Montebello. We also partner with other bureaus of the city and state and federal agencies on historic preservation matters, things like historic rehabilitation tax credits, things like policies around designation of resources on national lists or on state lists of historic places. But primarily what we do, and as you probably know this well from Marty, is we advance local implementation of our comprehensive plan goals and policies as it pertains to historic resources. And one of the reasons why we're here in Montebello tonight, and we'll be working with the Main Street area over the next 6 months or so, is that in the 2035 comprehensive plan, there were a number of policies that were adopted pertaining to documenting and honoring the significance of historic places in areas of the city that have been overlooked in the past, or for types of resources like places that are significant for cultural history or social history that haven't been prioritized in past documentation and designation efforts. And so one thing that has been on our mind is to go look at how we can help parts of the community that haven't been engaged in the past understand and document their resources. Yeah.
What is a resource? Are you talking about a building, or are you
You
talking
got
about...
a great question, and I've got an answer for you.
Okay.
So, historic resource in Oregon and terminology means old things that might be important or might be significant or might just be old and interesting. So, there are a lot of things that are historic resources in the sense of they're older than all of us in this room. They might not be special, but some might be. And so when I think about historic resource, I'm just talking about anything that's older that may or may not be important. But just for some quick terminology as background for everyone, just to make sure, as I use some of these bureaucratic words, we're all on the same page. There is a difference between a designated historic resource, things like a historic landmark or a historic district that have been formally identified and protected as something worthy of preservation. And so we talk about those as designated resources. There are places like the Hollywood Theater that are a landmark, Pittock Mansion is a landmark, a number of individual houses and buildings throughout the city have been identified and formally designated as a historic landmark and are subject to protection. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit more in a minute, because that's not, at this stage, what we're talking about doing here in Montebello. But it is something that individual property owners will pursue for their properties, and it's something that in the district scale sometimes gets advanced as a collection of property owners who are seeking designation. So some people might be familiar with the Eastmoreland or Laurelhurst efforts to become historic districts. Historic district is a type of designated historic resource on the National Register, but there's also historic districts that are created by the City of Portland City Council. We're not going to talk about that too much tonight because, again, that's a level of protection that we're not entertaining at this moment, or we're not proposing to do. And I'll explain how it all fits together in a minute. So some historic resources, designated, really important, subject to design and demolition protections. But then there's this other group of resources that have been documented and looked at by professionals and academics and weighed as to whether or not they're significant, whether or not they might be eligible for a future designation, whether or not there's something that's special about them, or if they're just interesting old places that may never be good candidates for historic designation, but might have a story to tell for the future. So something like a typical craftsman house in East Portland might not have anything special about it, might not be a good candidate for a landmark designation, but having information around who built it, the architect that designed it, maybe a family that lived there, can be used to inform real estate agents, development teams, academics, neighborhood associations who are looking to understand their history. And so there's this group of resources on this thing called the Historic Resource Inventory that have been looked at and documented that are not designated and protected with strong protections, but that there's information out there for the public to take a look at. So what I want to do just to get things started is, for those of you who have a laptop or a smartphone, we have everything that's been added to the inventory or designated as a landmark or district on an interactive web map. And so you can go on and see if something's been evaluated in the past through a historic effort. And again, I'm going to dig into it a little bit more so everyone's up to speed. But for those of you who, like me, want to be on your phone a lot, feel free to pull up the map and look around a little bit at what's already in Montebello. Basically, though, what's interesting about this neighborhood is it was at the edge of the city of Portland in the 1980s when our last comprehensive effort to look at and document historic resources was done. In 1984, there was 5,000 buildings across the city that were added to that historic resource inventory, about half of which were determined to have some special significance, maybe for architectural history or cultural significance. Another half, about 2,500 properties, had been worthy of sort of a footnote or worthy of some documentation. Those properties were also added to the inventory. On this map, I know it's probably a little fuzzy at the back of the room. The orange circles are ones that were determined to not be significant. The red circles are ones that were determined to be significant. And you'll see one blue circle on Southeast Stark, for those of you who have really good eyesight, and that's the one designated landmark in this Monteville Main Street area, and that's milepost 5. So you do have a historic landmark in the Main Street area. You have some of these resources that were looked at in the 1980s. But generally, the city of Portland and the Architectural Heritage Center, Restore Oregon, the historic preservation organizations have not paid a lot of attention in Monteville as opposed to places like the Skidmore Old Town area in downtown, or Northwest Portland, Irvington, Ladd's Addition, those types of places that have been heavily documented and in many cases have a lot of landmarks. So for those of you who want to go online, I made a short link here. It's tinyurl.com/YCBRS2WH. That was the shortest link I could get. So if you want to look on your phone, you can do that. This map is online, easy to access if you go look for it later. But I just wanted to give those of you who wanted to cruise around the opportunity to do so. Okay, so let me talk a little bit more about what it is I'm actually saying here. So I mentioned there were these designated resources. To be a designated historic resource like Milepost 5 or like Pettit Mansion means that there was a formal effort to designate it. The designation either happens by the Portland City Council or the National Park Service. And in Oregon, it requires owner consent. So today, there's no ability for someone to propose, I'm just going to use Amanda because I know her. No one in the room can make Amanda's house a landmark in Oregon unless Amanda agrees to it. In Oregon, you can create historic districts with a majority of owners saying they want it. They're relatively rare, but in general, to become a designated resource requires the owner to be the initiator of that process. Designated resources come with demolition and design protections. They're at various levels, but they come with strong or strongish protections to maintain the historic resource over time. There are also some incentives that come with it. There are about 700 historic and conservation landmarks in Portland, 24 historic and conservation districts, and only a couple of these things in Monteville. So I mentioned Milepost 5. There's also the Monastery of the Precious Blood, which is, I don't know the current name of it, but it's the facility just 10 blocks or so south of here. Great turn of the century, 1890s building. It's a landmark. Mount Tabor Park is a historic district, but there really aren't that many buildings in Monteville that are landmarks or historic districts. So you're not necessarily as familiar with seeing these come into your land use committee or as familiar engaging as other parts of the city that have these designated resources. But you do have some of these resources that are on the historic resources inventory. There's two flavors of resources. The significant ones are called ranked resources. Those are the ones that are found to be eligible for historic designation, have something special, but haven't been formally designated. They're subject to a 120-day demolition delay requirement, but no other design review or no requirement that would stop a permit. So there's a little demolition delay protection for those, but nothing else. I know in Monteville you've had some of these resources that have been demolished in recent years. There's been some discussions with your land use committee about what does it mean, how does it work. The resources that are interesting but didn't get determined to be significant aren't subject to any additional regulations for design or demolition. And the last time the city of Portland added resources to this list was 1984. So what brings us here tonight is back in the spring, the Monteville Neighborhood Association submitted a letter to City Council saying we're interested in historic resource inventory. We'd love to be a pilot project if and when funding becomes available. You know, pay attention to our neighborhood if you do this and broaden what's sort of understood as historic. Because of budget limitations, the City Council was not able to fund that request, but we were able to, at Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, find a small amount of money to do a targeted pilot survey in the Main Street area. So not quite the whole neighborhood look that we had wanted to do, but something that gives us the opportunity to get to know your neighborhood a little better, to work with, and I'll mention in a few minutes, University of Oregon graduate students, and hopefully to provide something that's useful for the neighborhood in the future in adding to the historic resource inventory significant and just documented places for broader public benefit. The way this project will play out is, a few months ago we came to the Land Use Committee and gave them a heads up that we had received a little bit of money to do this, that we were going to advance the project at a smaller scale. I'll show a map in a minute. But that we needed to team with others in the community. And lucky for us at the city and lucky for our budget, the University of Oregon's Historic Preservation Graduate Program is now here in Portland. So we teamed with, I'll make him raise his hand, Chad Randall, who is teaching a class this term. It's a regular once-a-year class. This is not Chad's first rodeo doing it, on documenting historic buildings. So this winter and early spring, we'll have University of Oregon graduate students, some are here tonight, documenting architectural styles, building materials, alterations, all from the sidewalk. So they're not going to be climbing into your property, they're not going to be trespassing, it'll all be happening from the sidewalk to say, what kind of buildings do we have here in Montebilla from what eras? Can we see changes happening over time, or is there indications about types of uses or businesses that may have been here in the past? After they complete their what's called like a reconnaissance survey, so sort of clipboards out in the field documenting buildings, we have a professional consultant who's worked on survey efforts in many states who will be quality control checking their work and then doing archival research on the places that seem like they might be significant to weave together a story about what happened there in the past, or what architect designed the building, or maybe what might make it special. After that research is done, and we've got a pretty tight budget, so I'll be asking for everyone's help at the end of the night who have interest, we'll be publishing a report this summer that sort of gives a context about what makes the Montebilla Main Street area unique in Portland history, what the stories are in that area, how development occurred over time, and then provides documentation on each of the buildings within the area for sort of broad public access and use. So it'll be a full report that gives that background, that has historic photos, documentation, information on all the buildings' history. And then what will happen after that is my office and the Historic Landmarks Commission will look to add those properties to the historic resources inventory. What that means would be that map I showed a minute ago, we would be adding more dots to that map. And the dots that are on the map, many, if not most of them, would be the unranked, not determined significant. And then some of the resources that really shine as having architectural significance or cultural association, that we'd be adding those resources to the map. For those of you in the room who are property owners or business owners, before any of that adding it to the map happens, we'll send another piece of mail notice. There'd be a public hearing to contest it or to support it or to find out more. And so this is not our last engagement with you as property owners about what it means. What we're not proposing to do is to designate any resources. So we won't be proposing in this effort to say, I'm just going to use an example because we all know it, the Academy Theater should be a landmark. Our students and our consultant might say it's eligible for landmark listing, that it should be added to the inventory as a significant resource, but to make it a landmark would require a subsequent process, and currently the owner would have to agree to that. So what we're looking to do is really understand and document buildings and the history of buildings in this area, so sort of what we coined the Montebilla Main Street, but basically the Stark Washington corridor, to learn more about them, to create a context story about the history of this area, and then to pull out what we find to be the most significant stories for broad public use and access. The other thing that we're doing here, and I think for some of us in the room who have worked with historic resources, is we're piloting new technology and new partnerships and doing this inventory work. Most of our counterpart cities have regularly done historic resource documentation and inventory. We haven't done it since the 1980s, so we've got a blessing and a curse. On one hand, if you go to Seattle, or you go to Chicago, or you go to Santa Fe, or Sacramento, these cities have regularly worked with their neighborhoods to do this kind of thing. We haven't in a long time, and so we have the opportunity to use new technologies and to gather information new and different ways. And so one of the things the students will be doing is helping us use an app that we've developed out in the sidewalks to sort of enter in information about buildings and provide documentation. And if they have a conversation with someone who says, oh, my Aunt Sally had a business in that building and then it went on to become Starbucks, I know isn't true, but it became something big, they can write that down and our researchers can prove that and kind of tell that story. So this is the area we're looking at. It's generally the area between about 85th, let's say 76th and 85th, Stark, Washington. There's a blue area and a gray area. The blue area is sort of the commercial core of the neighborhood with Milwaukee Lumber and the Academy Theater, Observatory, all of that stuff. The gray area is a buffer that we're going to take a look at too. Mostly those are houses or vacant lots. But we'll be looking at buildings throughout that area, again, for architectural style, materials, that kind of thing from the sidewalk. But it's really that area in blue that we think might tell a story about Main Street development here, Main Street development in Portland, and how Montevilla came to be what it is today. I keep talking about what's going to be documented, and it might sound a little scary to people who own property. We're not out there looking for code violations. We're not out there looking for whether or not someone has good taste in lighting fixtures or signs. What we're really looking to understand is sort of what historical information is present in the sort of built environment. So we're looking at things like when were buildings built. We have some of that information from the tax assessor. Much of it's not perfectly accurate for buildings that are 100 years old. So we'll be really trying to understand how old are these buildings. Is it an 1890 building that's been changed 3 or 4 times? Is it a 1930 building? Looking at architectural styles, so what are the styles predominantly in Montevilla? What are some of the design trends? Are there things in Montevilla that are not unique to Montevilla, but are notable design features, like the way the bays are, the sort of storefront bays are in businesses, or the materials that are used, like stucco or brick or concrete. We'll also be looking at things like alterations and additions. Is there a story about buildings at the middle of the 1900s being sort of modernized? Is there a story about neon signs? Or are there things on buildings that tell us about their history and importance? Looking at the current and former names of buildings and the businesses and people who have been in those business buildings. Do you have any legacy businesses in Montevilla in the Main Street area? Are there places like Milwaukee Lumber that really tell a story about the neighborhood over time? And then looking at other significant physical features, like you have milepost 5, but are there signs or other features that maybe those of you who go, on Stark and Washington every day don't notice because you're so used to it, but that really are important parts of the identity of Montevilla. And then the last thing, and this is one that I think we're really excited about, are there any important historical associations with those buildings? Do you have buildings in the Montevilla Main Street area that had an important person or business? Is there a story about an immigrant community or a group of individuals who created a business or lived there? What can we learn about the places that are still there that's beyond the architecture? So that's when I talk about documenting features, that's what we're looking at. We're not looking at, do you have ADA accessible bathrooms? We're not looking at, do you have double pane windows for energy efficiency? It's none of that stuff. It's all about what are the historic qualities of the building. And then I mentioned significance a bunch of times. So after students go out and document from the sidewalk these buildings, the questions we'll be asking is, which, if any, buildings really are important in history? And we have guidance from the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office and National Park Service about how you evaluate significance. It's been a 50-plus year exercise in the profession of historic preservation about narrowing the list of things down that are important to just the most important ones. So when I talk about significance, what we're really talking about is from the information gathered both out on the sidewalk and in the archives, which places rise to the level of being really important. Usually it's a small handful of places out of, if you look at 100 buildings or places, it could be a large number of it, it could be a small number of them, but it's rarely everything is significant. And in a place like Montevilla, I assume that you'll have a bunch of places that are maybe from the recent past or have been really altered, there's not a significant story. That's probably most of what we're going to find, but there will be places that fall into some categories that are established as being important. Design and architecture is sort of the most familiar one. do you have any buildings that really do stand up as being important design, works of design or architect design places that are special? Do you have any places that are associated with a notable individual? Is there somebody who, like I mentioned, started a business in the Main Street area, lived in the Main Street area? Maybe there was a big event that happened that catalyzed something important. Is there a story about a person or a group of people? And then there's this thing, association with broad patterns in American history. There's some buildings that really speak to an era or that tell a story that's bigger than Montevilla, maybe it's important for the city. And then last is the social and cultural importance. Is there something in a building or something in a place that really is important for social and cultural reasons?
Hey, Brandon.
Yep.
Can you go back to that slide and talk about that photo on the right?
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Is that,
that's a good question. Part of it is we rehash old PowerPoints. I don't have a lot of good Montevilla photos, so one of the things I'm looking at the students to do is give us really good Montevilla photos. The building at the top right is a example of a building that is sort of quintessentially Queen Anne in architecture. It's up in the Woodlawn neighborhood. It's determined significant because it's such a good example of a Queen Anne building, and it is probably a textbook about Queen Anne. It's got all of its original materials. It hasn't seen that much change, and they're relatively rare of that level of what we call physical integrity. The building at the bottom right is a relatively recent new construction project. It hasn't stood the test of time to be significant. It hasn't been around long enough. We don't have enough distance from when it was built to determine whether it's not significant. And so typically in survey efforts, things that were built in the last 40 or so years don't get looked at because there's not enough reflection to determine whether or not it really is important. So that's a little bit about what we're looking at, how we're going to look at it. The way the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability is looking at this effort is through a set of project goals. And so we recognized that there was some interest in the neighborhood and the neighborhood association and being a pilot project for inventory. And so we were able to cobble together the partners and the funding to do that, even on a limited basis. So we're interested in having that partnership and responding to a request. We're really interested in piloting new technology in partnership with the University of Oregon grad program, and then asking all of you in the next slide for maybe a little bit of help. We're really interested to see if there's a way for us to capture information about the history of the built environment in an efficient and thoughtful way that can be used by the broad public. Really interested in documenting the history of buildings in an area that's both zoned for and experiencing a lot of change. It's probably not lost on anyone in the room that change is happening, and some of that change is guided, and some of that change is maybe not what you expected. But part of the inventory effort is to really understand the history of an area so that new construction change can be informed by that history. So today, if you were looking to build, in addition to a building in Montevilla or a new building, there's not that historic record to go to and say, what in this Montevilla Main Street area is important, or what are the design trends, or what are some significant features that this new addition or building might respond to. So some of the project is looking to give that information out there for people to do with it if they know what to use it for. And then really looking to say, are there some significant places in the Stark-Washington corridor that are eligible for historic designation that really stand up on their own as being important candidates for historic designation in the future. To add that information to that public web map that I told you about to give people access to learn about it, who might be a student, real estate agent, planner, others, to just learn about it and use that in an intelligent way. If any of those buildings that are added to the map were determined to be significant, they would come with a demolition delay, 120-day demolition delay requirement, so it would give the community some time to maybe rally to save it, negotiate with the owner, but would not come with any design or real strong demolition protections unless or until they were designated in the future. So one of the project goals is to say, are there a couple buildings in Montevilla that in the public interest might be worthy of future discussions around designation, and might it be worth discussions with that property owner about financial or regulatory incentives or an interest in seeking designation as a landmark. And so what can come out of a project like this is to say, maybe these are the most special places, and maybe building a relationship with those owners and having that conversation is important. Like I said, owner consent is required for a historic landmark designation, and so that piece of the puzzle is really about if there's something that's special and doesn't have protections, how to have that conversation about maybe prioritizing listing in the future. So that's really what we're looking at for project goals. I do want to say one last thing before I ask all of you to help us pull together great historic information. For those of you who are like really jazzed about this topic and are really interested in historic resources and designation, we are making some changes to our rules for historic landmarks and historic districts. And we're also making a few changes to how the inventory gets updated, the decision maker and who does that. So we do have a draft of some zoning code changes that went out today. We're accepting public comment on those through April 1st. Then we'll come back in the summer with a revised proposal and then on to City Council at the end of the year. The project is called the Historic Resource Code Project, primarily affecting those areas that are currently designated as historic districts or historic landmarks, and the design protections that apply, and what level of review is required and that kind of thing. But one thing that's important about this project is today there is not, one of the reasons why it hasn't been updated so long, there's not the vehicle to bring things onto the map other than that historic designation. And so one of the things that we're proposing to do is to give the City Council the ability to take reports like what we've done here and that building documentation and have a hearing and add that information to the map as significant resource or just a documented resource on the inventory. So that's a really bureaucratic nuance of all this, but we'll need to change the code before we can add anything to that map through Montevideo. So for those of you who are really excited about this, who will keep engaging on this topic, there's a few moving pieces of the puzzle here. But really what we're excited about is getting to know Montevideo a little better, using this opportunity to provide lasting documentation about the Main Street area, what makes it important, what stories are out there, to give everybody in the community a little more information about the specific buildings, to set the stage for future conversations about protection or potential future designations. But to make this project as successful as we can, there are some things that would be really helpful for us. So even though I work at the city and I have access to interesting building permits or some historic photos, I really don't have access to much about Montevideo. And so there are some archives out there that do have information, like the Oregon Historical Society, the City of Portland Archives, Architectural Heritage Center, a few other places. But there's very little in the public record today about the history of Montevideo and historic documentation from Montevideo. So what we're hoping to do is, for those people in the room who either themselves or they know a person who knows a person who might have historic photos, blueprints, drawings, names of businesses or people, even things like a menu from a restaurant that's gone and might have been here in the past. We're really interested in learning about stories and information, let's say from the Montevideo period that's before 1970 or 1980, but if you have something more recent, we're interested in that too. But we really need to go beyond the archives to start to understand what's here, what's significant, because our hope is that that final report that we put out, even absent all the individual buildings that get documented, can really tell a story that hasn't yet been told about that Main Street area. Yeah.
So you're focusing on Stark, Washington. Are you open to receiving information about other properties in the neighborhood?
We definitely are. I think one of the things that is a little tough for us about the scope of the project is we were really interested in doing the whole neighborhood. And I think that was some of our thinking when we put the request to the City Council was, let's really get to know Montevideo. And because of resources and what we were able to cobble together, we had to be selective in what it is we could document. And so I think the story that we're really interested in understanding is the one about sort of commercial development and Main Street and the history of businesses and commerce in Montevideo. There are a ton of interesting buildings and stories in the neighborhood for sure. And I think if somebody wants to share that with us, we'll gladly take it under consideration. There may be a few places outside of this map that we can get around to document, but we had to focus our resources somewhere to create a product that's deep enough that it's valuable to people, but also can serve as a pilot for us going after grant public dollars. And if we're successful and people in the room feel like this was a good partnership, maybe we come back and do the bigger neighborhood in the next phase. And I am going to put my contact info up here on the screen. So if anybody has any leads or themselves have documentation, send it my way, give me a call, and we'd love to take a look at that stuff. If you have something and don't want to give it away or share it permanently, we're happy to take a look at it and see what we can do. So I think I'm going to pause there. I might invite either Chad or Matt Davis. Matt is a historic preservation specialist at a local firm, Architectural Resources Group. He's going to help the UVO students. He's going to help the city navigate this survey process since he's done it in other places and is really familiar with evaluating those resources. So Matt's going to be our behind-the-scenes expert, and then Chad and his students, you'll probably see them out in front of Bipartisan or Townsend's with a notepad or an iPad, jotting down information sometime in the next couple months, maybe taking a photo. Like I said, they're not going to be they're not going to be crawling around inside your building or showing up one day demanding access. They might come into a business and ask what they know about it, but that's really the extent of what the survey will be. But Matt or Chad, do you have anything you want to say?
Well, I just want to underscore, Brandon, hello, good evening, everyone. Good to see you. It's an honor to finally engage this evening. We've been looking forward to this for a while. And I want to underscore what Brandon was saying about what an auspicious moment this is for the city. I mean, the fact that the Historic Resource Inventory hasn't been updated for 35 years, to those of you who are less familiar with this end of local government may not realize how peculiar that is for a city of this size with this amount of historic building stock to have just sort of stopped monitoring historic resources for 35 years. Usually you would update every 5 to 10 years or so. But there are very good reasons that's been put on hold, and this is an auspicious moment because the city of Portland is finally turning the corner and coming back around to responsibly managing historic resources. The other thing that's very auspicious about this moment for the neighborhood of Montevilla, and Ben, you alluded to it at the very end, this whole undertaking will hopefully serve as an inspirational template and pilot for the rest of the city, as well as maybe for other parts of this neighborhood, which is quite a bit larger, of course, than the map you see up there. And so I'm excited to be part of this undertaking, and I hope many of you are as well, because this is pretty exciting for Montevilla to be playing this role for the city of Portland.
Hi, so I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to come tonight and let us participate and share in this. We're very excited about this chance to document and be involved in the survey project for a couple of reasons. First of all, it gets the students out and looking at real buildings. So they study buildings, they study architecture, and you can only get so much from slides and books. So being out on the sidewalks is a really good opportunity for them to see what's out there and learn the names of different building parts and try to identify what style or combination of styles certain buildings are. And be able to talk about those not only independently, but as a collection, as a group of buildings, as a neighborhood or a streetscape. So the neighborhood and the project will be really great experience for that, but also to work on what collaboration is and how that works for a preservation team or a preservationist, working with a consultant, a skilled consultant and group that does this professionally for a living and knows the constraints of budgets and time and so on, working with the city that's eager to branch out into these neighborhoods and help the communities identify important and interesting architectural stock. And then working with the community itself and coming to meetings like this and seeing how these sorts of issues are discussed and what priorities and concerns are raised by people that own these properties and walk around and live in them. So thanks very much. I'm around tonight and I can share my information as well. I'm happy to discuss the role that the university is playing in it. We just moved, as Brandon said, from Eugene a couple of years ago, in part for this very reason, to be able to go out and work in neighborhoods, to be a part of what's going on in Portland. Eugene's sort of been combed over a few times by the various classes over the years, so it's a really good experience for us. Thank you.
One person who's been really helpful already is Pat Sanders has helped us really get an understanding of what's already known out there about the neighborhood. helping us understand the history of Monteville is not on the internet. No one I know knows about. So Pat's been really great. And I think I'm hoping, for those of you that remember a building you really like in Monteville, in the Main Street area, or something that you're really curious about, just shoot me an email that says, like, I've been curious about this building for a long time, pay special attention to it, or there's a sign that's really cool, make sure you see it. So even if you don't have that historic documentation that we're asking for, totally feel free to give me some pointers about things that you'd like to see in this project. And for those of you who want to get involved in a more deep way, send me an email and let me know that, so we can figure out where to plug you in. But anyway, I thought maybe we got a few more minutes for questions or conversations. Shoot.
Yeah, what about what if we have a sidewalk with a horse ring on it? Does that count?
Yeah, so you should let me know where it is. There is a maintenance, the PBOT's maintenance manual for curb reconstruction does have guidance around retaining those horse rings. I think it's pretty cool. But the one thing that the inventory can do is it identifies things that maybe most of us don't notice or might not notice. So if there's something like, if you've got an ancient fire hydrant or a street clock or something that you know, is special and interesting, let us know that too, so we don't miss it.
So I had a more important question. So the 5 mile thing,
Yeah.
I thought that referred to the apartments at the Old Baptist
Manor.
Manor.
They just stole the name.
They stole the name. Does it refer to 5 miles out on Baseline Road?
That's right, from City Port.
Oh, I thought it was mile 5. I thought it was that building too.
Yeah.
So there are a number of milepost markers that were designated as historic landmarks like 35 years ago at the city council. So allegedly there's a milepost 4. I'm not sure that it's still there.
It's up on the other side of Mount Tabor at the church.
It's still there?
It's still there.
Okay.
There are 2, 4, 5, and as you get further out, Ventura Park has one, and there's about 3 more out all the way to Clackamas Community College.
And 2 is in the wall at
23rd.
the cemetery,
20th.
right?
Yeah.
So you've got one, it's still there, it's on, was that Stark in 78?
78.
78, it's sort of
At
in
the
the,
upholstery shop.
yeah.
It used to be covered by carpet fragments
Right.
all the time.
They just recently painted it, but they did make it more visible.
And if folks are wondering why this little mile marker is the one landmark, and why it's so significant, this was the survey for the Oregon Territory. I mean, these mile markers refer, I mean, at that point, that included Washington, parts of Idaho. I mean, this was really sort of ground zero for the initial platting of this part of the country.
I think Pat.
So it's clear to the East Coast, doesn't it, that baseline,
No,
that survey mark?
no, it starts at Willamette Stone.
Okay, that's
And the Northwest Territory was plotted from Willamette Stone. And it's, if you go to Parkdale, it's Baseline Road, which is in essence Stark Street. It's the same line.
Yeah. Baseline Road and Hillsborough too.
Right. Did you find, wasn't there a business in Monteville that was called something like Milepost
Oh, yes.
Bar?
Let's see. Mile 5 Roadhouse.
So there are other
Where
interesting
Yahala
things.
restaurant is today.
Right. There are interesting things around the mile, that there was here at an earlier period of development, that milepost was part of the identity, if not the sole identity of how this community started. And so those are the kinds of things in the survey documentation that'll tell that story.
And
When
the
the milepost was-
cavalry literally used a rope to measure that.
Oh, no kidding.
There's a story about that, how they.
Massive bright notes up here.
Yeah.
More questions?
How does one research one's own property as a private one? Like the history of who owned it, things like that, who do we call, or where do we look?
Yeah, great question. So that's one of the things.
What was the question?
Oh, the question was how does somebody go about researching their own house or their own property? Where do you look? Where do you start? One of the things that's really great about everything that's on the inventory today is it's a starting point for people. So we oftentimes will get calls from new homeowners who say, I'm interested in researching my house, and I say, well, it's on this inventory list. And they use that inventory as a springboard to go further investigate the architect's name, or it starts them down the path. Generally, though, there are a couple of repositories that people start at. One, if it's not already on the inventory, if you don't already have a lead in, the City of Portland Archives is a good place to start. They have great historic photos of some buildings, some areas of town, some interesting things that you might not think of, like aerial photos that turned out to be a pretty good source of sort of early photos of houses, permits, other documentation that may have been done. Oregon Historical Society downtown, they have a research library that we'll certainly be going to as part of this project with photos and old city directories to find out who lived where. Most of that's not online yet. The stuff that is online, a lot of it is more poorly scanned documentation, so it's not quite searchable and indexable. Depending on sort of when your house is built or what style it is, the Architectural Heritage Center might have some information about it, or could tell you more about buildings of that style, when they were built, or what some of the design themes are. And so those are some places to get a start. Matthew, any other?
Well, and the Architectural Heritage Center does do a session once or twice a year specifically about how to research your own home. I don't know if their website has a 1 or 2 page summary of that, but you might want to check in with them to see their things. I'll give you my card too.
One thing that's been pretty cool is on the more land use side. Regularly, we see property owners who either have or are buying one of these properties that are significant, decide, not because there's a regulation that requires them to, but decide to incorporate the building or parts of the building into their new design. So it's not uncommon for design teams or development teams, certainly there are exceptions to this rule, to see that there's something important on a site, and as they start to think about what they'll do there, incorporate those features. And so that's something that's been a positive, I think, that we've seen that the inventory can do, is inform people from the very beginning about what might be important on the site, if it's worth pursuing demolition, or if the neighborhood's going to have something really important to try to save, or if there's a way to incorporate new development around one of those inventory properties. Even though the only regulation that applies is that demolition delay, it still gives people information early on. If you own a property or have a business in the area, totally happy to make myself available to talk about if you have unanswered questions or concerns. I want to be especially attentive to you to make sure we give you all the information that you need, so this doesn't seem like it's something scary.
Are you going to be looking for neighborhood volunteers to help with the investment at all?
Yes, that's a good question. So we've got our University of Oregon students. If there are some people who are interested in going out there and doing documentation, shoot me an email and let me know. Say, really would love to go out there. If you're a great photographer or you always wanted to go document buildings, let me know that too, and we'll try to find a good spot to plug you in. And it may be that we've got a little more bandwidth with the students or staff to go and look at a few places that aren't in this map, and so that could be another place that we bring people along with. Let me know if you're interested in that, and we'll figure out how to get you out there to help.
Is there anything that we could do to help the students if we grew up in the area and we know the history?
Yeah, definitely.
I could leave my name.
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
Please do. Maybe we
Yeah.
can get a copy of
My
you
brother and I grew up, yeah, we know a lot about Monteville, Stark Street.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we want to take you up on that. So I'm going to give my card to you as soon as I'm done. But we'd love to get a copy with you, or to just sit down and see what you have to tell us.
Could you also give me the information, because I'm also interested in the history of Monteville and more broadly?
Sure.
It occurs to me that Monteville is unique in that it has a state highway, you know, kind of running perpendicular to our Main Street area. And I think there's a lot of historicity going up and down there. The Baptist Manor would be one of them. The now raised, American Chinese Village, that would have been, something to research anyway. Sadly, it's gone. So, is there any possibility of just extending in terms of the business district north and south of the,
Yeah, really good question. So, one thing is, as I understand it, the Chinese Village sign still exists. It was saved. I don't know if anyone here wants to talk about that tonight. But the sign was saved. It will be an effort to get it reinstalled somewhere. But I suspect if we had done this survey effort 5 years ago, that the Chinese Village sign would have been put on the inventory as a significant resource for the neon design, also one of the first Chinese American businesses in part of town. And that's the kind of, actually, our sign savior here. That's the kind of thing that the inventory is looking to capture. So that in that case, there would have been a demolition delay period, the neighborhood would have been notified. Maybe people could have rallied to save the sign on site or done something different with the site development. Because you don't have advance notice, and the developer would have known, oh, this is something that's important or stands out. About going up and down 82nd, one thing I'll be really honest about is because of the amount of funding that we have available and because we're piloting new technology, we wanted to look at an area that hasn't been surveyed in the past. But also we wanted to make sure that our process and our sort of community engagement work and how we approach this, we want to work out any kinks before we start looking at places that really have a lot of cultural significance. So we're sure we'll find some things of cultural significance here, but as we've been thinking about 82nd, there's both architecture, but then there's a lot of Asian American and other ethnic and social history, and we really want to make sure to give that effort enough attention to be able to do it right when we do it. So one of our thoughts is, well, if we learn from this and we improve our process and we get it right, then maybe there's an 82nd Avenue up and down study that's looking at mid-century buildings, looking at Chinese American history, Japanese American history, and that kind of thing. So the answer is totally on our minds. We just want to make sure we didn't bite off more than collectively we could chew.
So you mentioned new technology a few times, and you mind sharing what that new technology is?
Yeah, so back in 1984, everyone went out in the field with a clipboard and a piece of paper, and they documented the building, and they went to the archives, and then they did their research. And what we're going to be using is, we're using GIS technology, so ArcGIS, and students who are out in the field with an iPad, or if they take notes and go back to a computer, will be able to enter information in real time. So just to use an example, let's say Matt is out there looking at buildings and he says, oh, the Academy Theater is an arts and crafts building. And I'm in the office and say, oh, Matt, that's not right. That's a modern building. That we'll be able to have that discussion with the person who's out there in the field doing documentation. And being able to use that technology lets us create maps and other information about the year the building was built, or architectural styles, or maybe if we want to map where materials are, it'll all be geolocated on the building. So I didn't bring a copy of it tonight, but basically everyone will be out in the field, will have an iPad and a map and be able to enter information in real time on that location. And if they come across the horse ring, and they say, oh, there's a horse ring, they'll be able to create a new record for that horse ring in a spatially located way and say, there's a horse ring, and then Mac can say, oh, there's 5,000 horse rings, it's not elevate that one. So it gives us that ability to, we're piloting and see how it works. So that's sort of what we're thinking of. I do hear, there's another friend of mine who really wants us to move to a situation where we drive a drone down the street and use that. We're not quite at that level of technology. We're the city of Portland, right? We're a little behind. So we've got our technology piloting a little evolved.
Is that layer data then going to be public?
Yeah, so the idea is what we'd really like to do, again, is to add them to the inventory and to that map and go through the process to do that, which means ultimately the city council saying we accept this information. But at some point, all that information will be made public. And what we really want to do, I'm not going to get into it too much tonight, but what we're really working towards is on this broader map of historic resources, being able to sort and filter, being able to sort and filter information. So let's say you're a researcher and you're researching, you're researching synagogues, and you want to know about what synagogues were in Portland historically or currently. In a future reality, what we're hoping to have is a map of information on the historic resource inventory where someone can sort and filter that information. Or let's say you really want to understand Italian-American history, and you want to be able to find out businesses, buildings, places that have that history. We want you to be able to map that, and be able to find that in the map with relative ease. And so part of the inventory update for Montevilla is really an effort for us collectively as a city to understand more about the past and to have that information available in new and exciting ways.
Are there any archaeological resources available? Like, for instance, on our property, there's what I've been told is a cistern, or rainwater cistern, and I know somebody else in the river has dug up one of those.
Yeah.
Old outhouses. I mean, before we took possession of the building, there were two guys out in the backyard with a long metal probe that they would go down and they'd gone within there looking for outhouses to dig up bottles and things that people would use the outhouse as a trash dump, basically. Yeah. And just weird stuff buried in the backyard or a footprint of an old building or things like that.
So we have an area for historic designations for archaeological sites. We have very few of them in the city of Portland that have been designated, so places that are really identified, and this is so important that's worthy of protection. But there are some state regulations and rules around archaeological deposits and finding, so the state does have some minimum expectations for when you discover something that's significant for archaeology. Most of those are about indigenous peoples and sort of pre-contact archaeology, but there is some about that historic piece. But it certainly is an area where we want to learn and potentially identify things. The challenge, though, about mapping archaeological sites is you're friends with the bottle probes. If you map the site, then people know where they are. So that's one of the challenges with archaeology is how much of it's confidential and how much of it's public, and it's a tough balance. We do have one area of the city, it's sort of tangential, but you're not too far from it. It's called the Columbia South Shore. So up by like Costco and Airport Way, there is a large area there where they're doing ground disturbing activities. You do have to avoid known archaeological sites and do testing for archaeological sites because it was a significant area in Native American history. We know that there are village and burial sites. So some of that stuff we take a little more seriously. But yeah, that's like part of I think where we're trying to learn. Any last questions? Someone maybe who hasn't asked a question yet? Well, thank you everyone for having me. Like I said, please email me. I plan to come back probably when that report is in a draft phase or close to a draft phase, so you probably won't see me all that much, but for those who want to get involved, who just want to share information, or just say like, hey, let me know when you come back to the neighbor to talk about it, just shoot me an email, even if it's quick, to say who you are, and we will be back in a little bit once we have some more stuff to share. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. So we're going to conclude the general meeting, and we're going to invite you to stay for the beginning or for all of the board meeting. So if you're like really interested in Montevilla, please stay. We're going to have an open forum. And what else was I going to say? We'll take about 5 minutes, and there's coffee, restroom there, and restrooms there, and we're going to start up in 5 minutes. Oh, and if you want to be a member, be sure to put a check mark. Okey-doke. Welcome to the board meeting, and we're going to start with an open forum. I'm going to need my members back to approve the agenda. So, where's Bill? I'm here. I know. The important ones are here. I need to have one. Okay, so what we're gonna approve the agenda, and I was gonna modify it to not have the board director nominations, to have it done separately or privately, and then to not include approve or appoint nominees. under 8 o'clock. So, oh, there you are. Okay, Dylan, I'm gonna make a motion. I move that we approve the agenda with modifications.
Yes, right.
Yes. Okay. So because of what we talked about, we're gonna just, so I move that we approve the agenda with these modifications, these 2 items, taken out.
Seconded.
Okay, so delete, you're
Just
deleting.
delete those 2 items under 7:45 and 8 o'clock. So we're gonna open up the open forum, and what we are asking, all those in favor? Aye. Is that we're kind of a scantily populated neighborhood association board. But we're functioning and happy to keep going as we are. But if you are motivated to participate on the board, we're modifying our nomination process, and that is somehow let us know that you want to be considered, and then we will do some research, just find out if that's okay, maybe get some public comment. We had a situation last time that I don't want to go into, but I think this makes it a little more kind of, not a thing where, okay, you nominate yourself and then we decide we don't like you, you know, or, you know, we're a little concerned. So this way, just let us know either by email, or directly, and then we'll work on it from there. Yeah?
So, and if I could, I requested that. I just thought it might be easier for some folk to speak to us privately rather than having to nominate yourself in front of everybody and then be judged. It might be a little easier if you can come to any of us personally or via email. We do want more board members. I just thought this way it might be a little less intimidating, and also it honestly takes some of the pressure off us to just act like without much context.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Does he have a Monteville PDX address?
Yeah, Ron has his email set up.
And what's the name?
Ron at Monteville.
It was R.W. Thrasher, Montebello.
Okay.
R.W. Ronald Warren.
Thrasher?
R.W., my first 2 initials and my last name.
Okay. So email addresses go like this. I'm Brad at montebellepdx.org, Dylan at, Pat at, and then Ron is R.W. Thrasher at montebellepdx.org.
Yeah, they're on the website. You can also just click on the MNA email and it goes to all of us.
MNA email, right?
Yeah, MNA-email. That's
MNA-email.
On the website.
On the website. Okay, good enough.
Montebello Neighborhood Association website.
We have a question?
More of a request. I think I understand where you're coming from and what you just mentioned, and I'm wondering if it would be possible or work well in the spirit of like transparency and a perspective of what the process looks like, to list the questions or the concerns or the values or what type of process a potential board member would be expecting to go through, if that could be listed openly on the website, even though it then becomes a private conversation from that point forward.
I think we could post those on the website.
Yeah.
I think it's basically very, simple. We don't, like, I'm an accountant, but you don't have to be an accountant. You don't have to have lots of experience on boards, that kind of thing. And it also has to do with interest in the community and a certain kind of temperament. And those would be the most important things. Also, we're looking to diversify. So you know, all genders and all ethnicities. Notice we have 3 white guys on our board right now, and we kind of like to...
One white girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want more girls.
Yeah. So, more diversity, that's what we're looking at. And I'm not the best person to, put the best spin on that. I just, frankly, I'd like to see some of our Chinese community here. So we have this idea of an open forum, and usually we have question and answer time during the general meeting. So now's the time. And I'm going to call on you because you had a comment to me.
Oh, yeah, sure. So, my name is Elisa Fairweather, and I work for University of Western States, which used to be known as Western States Chiropractic College. And our current campus is located in the Russell neighborhood, just off of 84 and 132nd Avenue. But, so we have our chiropractic program still, but we've added a lot of other master's degrees, mostly in health sciences, and we are growing. So we outgrew our current campus, and we're moving into the Banfield Pet Administration Building on 82nd. So I was just coming to, I've been going around to a lot of the neighborhood associations, just letting people know that we're there, in case anyone's interested in any of our academic programs, but also because we want to provide and work with the neighborhood in general, whatever that looks like. And we have a clinic, and that will be open at that location as well, where we have chiropractic services, but also we can do blood testing and radiology and all kinds of other things. So I brought some information about our academic programs, as well as information about what we provide in our clinics. And we're planning on moving in there starting to move in September.
Okay.
And we have to be in there by May, so I know that's a wide range, but anyway, just wanted to let you guys know.
Were you on Belmont, is that where you were?
Maybe a long time ago.
Oh,
We've
okay.
been in a Russell neighborhood since the 80s.
Okay. So if someone wanted more information about getting into alternative medicines, that's where they go.
Yeah, and not just alternative. I mean, we do have masters in nutrition and sports science and sports medicine, and also clinical psychology. So lots of interesting stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Laura?
Yes.
I asked Laura to go to the training session for the warming shelter.
Yeah, so the warming shelter this year is going to be sponsored by, over here in Montevilla, by the same group. That's the Montevilla Warming Shelter.
Emergency warming shelter.
Emergency warming shelter. And they're going to be open when the temperature gets below like 30 degrees. And they'll notify all their volunteers, and they're going to have volunteers that actually work 4-hour shifts. And so they are looking for volunteers that are interested in working 4-hour shifts over at the warming shelter, and so that would mean that it would be probably a moment's notice that you would get or so to select one of the time slots. So there'd be 3 time slots, and usually there'd be 2 or 3 people at least there. Now I was just an observer, and so I've really never participated with the warming shelter, but they offer a clean, safe haven over there. In the 101 class that I took for 101 homeless shelter training, it was a real eye-opener for me to see that, people that come in there are just people that are totally desperate. And there's a lot of desperate people out on our streets right now, and my heart goes out to all of them, but you can only do so much as an individual. But if you were interested in signing up to volunteer for the warming shelter, that they would really appreciate that, or give donations to the warming shelter. And are you going to ask for donations for St. Peter's Paul too?
We're going to talk about making a donation from our funds.
Okay.
But you attended the training session. How hard would it be for someone to pick it up?
It wouldn't be very hard, actually. I think that just a person with the basic intellect that can deal with situations that come up in a place like that. For example, one of they being the people that are managing the shifts at the warming center, whether it be 2 or 3 people. If somebody comes in, they try to separate the men from the women. There are no conjugal things going on in there, or people are asked to leave. But another thing that they do is to try not to call for ambulances. They try to let the patient, if there's a problem, diagnose themselves, and then they will offer to get them to wherever they need to go for the treatment. But as far as cold injuries are concerned, usually it's trench foot that they have, but no sorts of really frozen parts of their body where they're already going black and gangrenous on them. But that can happen pretty quickly. And so it's up to you to recognize that, but in talking to them, in talking to one of the people that you're trying to do some control of the situational control, give them plenty of body space, always allow them an outlet meaning a door. If you need them to do something, always give them an alternative. Like you can keep that behavior up, or you can have to leave and do it outside. And once you go outside, you don't come back in because they don't allow you to come back in once you go out. And
just a side note, so I don't want to give myself a pat on the back,
No.
but I worked there a couple of times last year.
Oh,
And
congratulations. Thank you.
some of it just, it's not all, you know, social intervention. A lot of it is just cleaning up, because the requirement over St. Peter and Paul is that everyone is out by 7 o'clock. So you have to wake people up, you have to get them up, feed them, and then clean the place up afterward. So, you know, if you're good with a broom or wiping things down, you know, you'd probably be able to fit in. So, anything else, then?
Yeah, and so that, I didn't really understand who does the cooking. I didn't know if it was the volunteers or what, but they do serve 2 meals, one at night and one in the morning.
Yeah,
And,
some people from our group last year were doing it. I don't know who's gonna be doing it this year.
yeah, and if you want to donate or get in touch with them or email somebody there, they're at info@portlandassembly.com.
Is there an age requirement to be a volunteer?
No, I don't think so. I didn't mention one. Would you know, Brad?
What's that?
Is there an age requirement for being a volunteer?
Oh, I'm sure maybe over 18.
Over 18 probably.
Yeah. So how would you contact them to make yourself a volunteer?
Info
Oh,
info@portlandassembly.com.
okay.
Participate, email, or make a donation. Any questions?
It's almost getting that cold now, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Would
couldn't.
you be right to say that they admit people when the temperature gets down to 30?
Yeah, actually, I think it was like 28.
Oh, does
That's
that sound
cold.
right? That's really cold.
Or a certain amount of moisture, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't know who's responsible actually for opening up the shelter and making the announcement that the shelter's open, but I'm sure they.
It's actually a regional-wide thing. It's not just they decide, it's a
Right.
regional thing.
You have to contact the regional.
The funding comes from some regional government, I don't know, probably the county.
Hmm.
Thanks, Gar.
You're welcome.
So we're about
You
to
bet.
close out the public comment time. Any thoughts, questions?
I spoke to you a little bit during the break about this, about how people can become members of the Bonneville Neighborhood Association. It's my opinion that people should be able to come the day of the election, and show a bill, like a current bill or a driver's license or some sort of identifier saying that you're a resident of Montevilla. Because the prior meeting statute, or whatever you want to call it, the rule, that you have to attend a general meeting beforehand. This seems to...
It's actually, we have bylaws and then we have board policies, and the bylaws don't say anything about that. It's something we can, it's a board policy because it allows us to update our records. You come the time before, and we can update our records, and then the night of, we have our member list all ready to go. So,
as I said to you before, you know, some people have to work in the evenings and might not be able to attend a meeting before the election, and that was,
yeah.
you know, that could be a problem.
Let's see if we can come up with a solution to that.
It would be hard for that person to serve on the board, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if they're working in the evening, yeah.
Just to be able to vote in the...
And we have members who are very, shall we say, active, and they can't even make the meetings because they have other things going on, so.
But as far as the voting restrictions are, as to who can vote, you can't go the night of the vote, and you have to come before.
Yeah, it has been the policy. Now, 2 times ago, we had a special meeting for people to become members the night of, and it was kind of a which one did you use for that?
I mean, that was kind of a special occasion, and once we had that, then we felt like the membership list was up to date, and that it really made sense. You know, you have like, what is it, 3 years? You have to have been coming to a meeting within the 3 years.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, so it's...
So, I think to me, it makes sense that you'd be involved coming to a meeting at least once in a year before, you know, before voting. I mean, that doesn't seem too strict of a rule to me. I mean, it just shows that you're interested in wanting to be involved. But we didn't have it that one time where, just due to the records were not strong enough. So we wanted to make sure that everybody who felt that they were already a member had the opportunity to do that night. But I think moving forward, it makes sense that it's not really necessary and a lot of extra work involved, especially when you're, you know, relying on a small election or team organization.
So if you, election coming up next October, if you signed up any time in the previous 3 years, then, you know, so your membership lasts 3 years from the last time you signed in and put a check mark. So I think that's the fail-safe on it. You know, you don't have to come the time before, you can come any time before. Thank you, guys. You're welcome. Everybody have a copy? I did have a copy. It got buried.
I mean,
Well,
I honestly read it.
I handed them out. What did y'all do?
You gave us some too.
I got an agenda for tonight, is what you gave me.
We already posted it, right?
Yeah, but we have to approve
Pull them up.
I think all of you check.
it. Here you go. Turn the thing over and upside down. Okay, so this has been well gone through. Edited to include people's last names and correct spelling of their names, etc. And in order to be legal for, getting new check signers, for as much good as that has done. So,
I'll move that we'll accept the meeting minutes from last month, from December 10th month.
I second. Oh, he seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So, before we go on to finances, should we discuss how we want to do the application, the nomination thing?
Well, we do have, for our elections, given questions that we all answered, will you, I don't know how they handle you, but we did that, but I would think those would be good, like writing them, and then it's consistent.
Yeah. So let's put that questionnaire out on the website.
So shall we have a motion?
Well, let's first decide what the questions are
Well, what I think we should do is to go back to the questions that were prepared by the past year's selection committee that they asked all candidates to answer.
Okay. I don't have a copy of that.
No, I think we could come up, I don't think that in a motion we need to list the questions. I would say that we would use the questions used for the election in 2018.
Okay. I would so move.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
One comment, kind of bypassed all that with me.
Yeah.
Well, that's why this came up. We realized it was kind of off the cuff and.
Yeah. Dylan was off the cuff too, just so you know.
But it would be nice if we had, standard
procedure.
questions or a procedure. I feel like asking people to just kind of jump in during the board meeting is hard.
Yeah.
You're right.
It might be easier if they can, do it at their own time, think about it.
Well, and then we
Well,
have a
there's
set of
this thing
questions
where
to
people-
make sure, they're qualified to, they don't have to be an accountant or a retiree or whatever, or experience, and like you were saying earlier, that an interest in participating in the function of the association, as well as being a member.
Yeah, and I remember one of your qualifications was having been on other boards.
Yeah.
And I was on other boards. Dylan has, and so we all have.
Yeah.
We're all experienced.
I don't think anyone has to have been on the board.
No, I don't think that should be a requirement. I
time.
think a residential requirement, membership in the association should be a requirement. And then maybe just a brief, why why you wanna be on board or something like that.
Well, we already made the decision, so
Yeah,
we can
we already
actually,
made the
we
decision,
can
so-
move on to
Yeah.
another, to the next topic.
So I think I'm gonna go ahead and give the treasury report, and then one of you two can pick this up for next time.
Right.
Because I just got, the 12/31 statement, from Muse, and, so even though things are kind of up in the air with the bank account, we do have funds. And so we have, and I'll submit this to you so you can put it in the minutes. But we have 6852.34 in the checking account. In the savings account, we have 1708.18.
Sorry, one more time?
$1,708.18. And then we have an uncashed check for $1,040. And that adds up to $9,652. So that's the treasurer report.
Right.
And then Pat has brought up the subject of having a budget. And I don't think it's something that the MNA has done a lot, maybe in distant past. We consider an expenditure, we approve it, and that is the budget. But since at the organization I do other work for, I do plan, I do the budget, basically. And so we budget for our resources, the giving, and then for the expenditures. And so I was just looking, you asked a question about the Franklin Foundation, how much we had given to them.
Franklin High School,
Yeah, yeah.
PTA.
And so that got me looking at the, all the transaction records from last year, which would give us a very good outline of what we would budget. And I think our revenue projection, and I'm not sure we're not gonna get this finished. So basically, this is a discussion. Our revenue projection would be in two categories. One would be basically our own initiation of like cleanup day or special projects of that kind, like the Gleason Pizza operation. And two, our other source of resources is being reimbursed for communications expense. But it becomes incumbent on us to actually go out and make those expenditures. If we don't get out in the community and communicate what we're doing, then we don't get reimbursed for it. So what we can do, and so I guess we'll just table this till February.
Well, could you draft
I can.
a budget,
Yeah.
and, like recurring expenses, so we know what those are, and maybe going by, past expenses to come up with categories and maybe rough amounts?
Did you see the email I sent you today?
I'm not sure which one, about the budget.
Well, anyway.
I saw, no, I don't think I saw that.
It was basically the outline for the annual report that Amanda gave. And so it had everything summarized in categories like election expenses, supplies, and that kind of thing. So I think, but to me, budgets are, because I'm an accountant, been trained in this. Budgets are more than just saying, okay, we got this money, this is how we're gonna spend it. It's planning. So that's what budgets mean to me, you know. Now, there's a limit to how much we can be reimbursed from Southeast Upward. And so we should plan on at least meeting that goal. We made donations of $500. With an organization that has almost $10,000, I think we can do better than that.
So should we set a targeted, I guess like you said, targeted donation amount or targeted community giving, and then target for special events?
Yeah, let's say $1,000. So we're going to donate $1,000. It could be more because, last year was sort of, everything was touch and go as we went along. So when we had an opportunity to give XYZ organization $500, we balked at that and gave them $250. So.
So could you maybe draft something for
I
this
will.
February's meeting?
Yeah.
And then we can discuss it.
Yeah, we'll do that. And then, you have the discussion of donation to Muse. Makes you think of Kid Cats, but it's the Monteville Emergency Warning Shelter. And since we are not able to physically write checks right now, it would be a difficult thing to consider, but
Could we talk about it as when we talk about the budget?
we could. But then by the time that happens, the warming, cooling season might be over.
Well, do you think that we will be able to have,
We
able to write
will
checks
meet one way or another.
before?
We'll take that check, and we'll take the documentation, and we'll go to another bank and open another account for you. I mean, I am really unhappy with that service. That lady, nice lady, the fact that she doesn't know how to access, the person that can actually say yes or no to us.
We spent several hours with this checking account.
What I'm tempted is,
Can we just pull out the cash and?
what's that?
We'll pull out the cash and.
We can't pull out the cash
can't do
until
anything yet.
we get official, account open with us as signers. It's a catch-22 every which way you look at it.
Yeah.
Where's the checking account now? Where's the money at now?
Riverview.
So do we want to decide on that tonight, going to another bank and depositing that check so that we can actually write checks?
That's a good idea.
Because the board needs to decide that. I mean, one suggestion would be a branch of US Bank on Gleason. I don't really particularly care which bank, but I know that is close.
Within 10 blocks of my house, there are like 4 banks. There's Portland, On Point, used to be.
Right.
There's a US Bank, there's a Bank of America, there's a Wells Fargo, right there in the 103rd Stark Street, Washington area. So there's 4 banks right there, and I don't know where you all live, but they're within, a mile of my house, roughly.
Well,
Yeah,
I live pretty close to you, so.
and they're open Saturday.
They're open Saturdays, which is the big one.
Yes, I think all 4 of those are open on Saturdays from, I know, the On Point is open from like 9 to 5 or something like that, 4 on Saturdays, or 9 to 2, 9 to 1 or 2. So they close early in the afternoon on Saturday, but they're open on Saturdays. And I think the other 3 banks there are also open on Saturdays, like from 9 to 1 or 2, something like that.
So On Point is a local bank, and it's.
On Point
It originally was Portland, Portland teachers. And then it became, it expanded and became more, I think they're statewide now, but they're community-wide, they're out in Newburgh.
Is that the one that's in that?
It's in that strip mall right there, just.
Next to Mall 205?
Yes, right to the west of Mall 205.
Can we designate this as an emergency measure? And if next month we can decide whether we want to stick with Riverview or move to On Point. But right now, we have bills to pay, we have people that need money. I think we need to go ahead with this. Plus, the check is outstanding 3 months, you know, who knows?
A lot of checks aren't valid after 90 days.
90?
A lot of checks, you'll say,
so,
right, a lot of companies, now some companies do longer than that, but some companies say cash is within 90 days or it's no good.
Right, so we gotta go ahead with it.
That's what this check
I don't know where this check is coming from, so I don't know.
It doesn't say anything like that on the check, so,
says.
but still, the fact that we, you know, they made a contribution to us and we haven't cashed the check, they must be thinking about it.
It's very irritating to me personally when somebody, when I write a check to somebody and it's still sitting out there and hasn't come into my checking account.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to decide what to do. Are we going to, do you think that we will be able to write a check to Muse or anyone else and to deposit the check?
Well, it may happen tomorrow, or if they don't allow us to open an account, can we have an emergency meeting?
Could we also just preemptively approve going to On Point if we need to? Because we could make an account in a day, deposit that check, and we have access to $1,000.
Well, and I can go, one of the managers I had an issue with when they changed over, upgraded their security system, so I've been in several times to one of the managers, so I can go ask for this certain person that has her own office over there. She's an assistant manager, but she's had contact with me personally on a number of occasions.
So I'll make a motion. I move that we approve opening up a second account if it is necessary in light of the restrictions on opening an account at Riverview. And that's my motion.
I'll second that. Where is the closest river?
Can we-
It's up on, it's almost to the freeway, across from the Taco Bell. So if you're coming.
On Stark?
Yeah, if you're coming on
okay,
Stark, it
okay,
used to be
okay.
Merchants Bank.
Okay, yeah, I forgot about, there's one right there on Stark and just on the west side of the freeway, there's can't remember the name of it.
But we have a motion before us. Do you want to amend the motion? Is that what you're
No, I was
asking
just
to do?
asking.
I would
Okay,
like
so-
to amend, I guess if we do open a second account in On Point, I'd like us to move from Riverview to On Point. So with the intent to consolidate to one account.
I would rather keep it provisional, because we can always change it. Because we could have our account open by tomorrow. So we have a provisional pathway to go if that doesn't take place by the end of this week, which is, we're coming up on the 90 days. In fact, we already passed.
Well, that said, then it would be postponing, I mean, this would be a contingent,
It'd be
a contingency, so if we don't get this one, our current account operating, then we would have the approval of the board to
So do we need to designate that it would be on point, or is it more?
I'm okay with it being on point. I mean,
Okay.
you're still, we don't have to do that if
Right.
everyone opens.
And the provisional nature is that if we don't need to do it,
We can discuss it further later.
yeah, we can table it, or not table it, but simply not act on it.
So do you want to accept Dylan's amendment?
I don't want to. I don't want, I want to have the option of staying with Riverview.
No, I agree with that.
He's not saying that,
Yeah.
he's saying opening a second account if we need to.
Yeah, if we opened a second account, we should include the intent to consolidate to one bank.
Well, see, that's, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I don't think we need to have an account in this bank and this bank and this bank. You
It's
know,
not
I
the
think
intent.
that gets confusing and hard
Okay.
for bookkeeping, you know.
It can even just be.
So let's
intent.
amend, okay, so amended to, with the intent to move our resources, all our resources over to the new account if it turns out that we use the account. That's probably too many words
That's
for a
really
motion.
confusing.
Okay, so,
Or it would be a provisional, so if we can't get the account straightened out so that we can write and cash and whatever with Riverview, then we'll open the one with OnPoint or whoever, as a temporary, situation until such time as we can get this other situation.
right,
That's my understanding of what you were saying a little bit.
right, yeah.
That wasn't my understanding. Because it sounds like what you're saying, if I'm understanding you, is that it will open a second account, and then if the situation changes with Riverview, we close that second account and go back to Riverview. And I'm not sure if that's.
Well, see,
the
that's
way
what
to do.
I wanted to have the flexibility to do.
Right,
we
maybe we should
could,
go back
we-
to Brad's motion.
The original motion?
Just, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we would have the flexibility to decide next month to move all resources over to OnPoint, or the flexibility to close that account, or use it as a provisional account, I don't know what. But we would finalize that at our next meeting.
Okay.
But meanwhile, you know, we're not able to use our funds, so
So
we're
we're
kind of in limbo.
So I,
Question arises when we would, you know, because even if we have a second account, how are we gonna get the funds out of the old account?
what I'd like to do is move the question in the interest of time, because I think we've discussed it enough, and I think we have a temporary solution, and then we can go on to the news.
Well, that's,
Because
you know,
it is a.
that's, we worked around what the motion should be, and now we've come
Now
to
we-
some kind of consensus on it.
Well, we should officially vote though.
You seconded it, right?
I did.
Yes.
You
It's been
made,
moved
you
and
motioned, and I
seconded.
seconded.
Right.
So now you ask all in favor.
Any discussion?
We already did.
We discussed it to death, I think.
Okay, all those in
Aye.
favor? And I'm gonna call East Gleason, make sure they know what's going on.
That's good. Okay.
So, in light of that,
Yeah.
I would like to move that we donate money to the Montebello Emergency Warning Shelter.
The other amount. I don't know.
I don't have a clue.
What is meaning?
$200?
Yeah, I was thinking higher.
Yeah,
I was thinking higher.
I would think higher too, because $200 isn't gonna buy much.
Right.
I mean, have you been to the grocery store lately? I was there tonight, and I thought, golly, I can remember when those 2 bags of groceries had cost me $20 and it cost me $100.
Okay.
My initial thought was more like 500. I don't know if that's
Yeah, I would.
not firm, but.
Oh, let me ask a question, since you're saying that. If the situation is that we have to open another account, so we can use the $1,000 check to be able to make this,
Yep.
this donation, do we need the $500 or more for anything else?
Not that I
within
know,
the
we
next
do owe
month?
some money to, Elizabeth Archer.
That's right.
Do you know
Does
how much?
anybody know how much?
I
It's
don't know.
250.
So that would leave us
That would leave
with
us with
200.
250?
What we could do is we could allocate, say, 250 now, and then once we get the bank situation straightened
Mhm.
out, designate another 250.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's 75.
Yeah.
I don't know where it gets. Oh,
Oh,
sorry,
so-
there's two bills. One for 75 and one for 112.50.
So almost 200.
Yeah.
I think we don't have to, like, put these two matters in lockstep. I'm assuming that there's at least a 70+ chance that we're gonna get our account open this week. And so we won't need to use this provisional thing. And so we're gonna be back to where, we're an organization with some $9,600, and we have an organization that needs money. And so that's what I'd like us to do. So I move that we donate $500 to Monteville Emergency Warning Shelter.
Seconded?
That means you seconded?
Yep.
Any discussion?
Call for the question.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
February, March meetings. February, general meeting.
So I have some new information on that.
For which
For February,
presentation?
for February, on the presentation by Terry Popino, the crime prevention
Okay.
coordinator. She was communicating with Jonathan Lewis about, let's see, one point of contact office to talk about homelessness, and she hasn't heard back from him. He's booked for February, and she doesn't know about March. So we could ask her just to come and give us what she has been able to gather. She was going to get information about crime reports in comparison to crime this year versus last year, and something about homelessness. So that was one person who was
Right.
going to be talking.
There is a, and, well, have you, but there's a description of putting together neighborhood watches. And it describes what it does mean and what it doesn't mean. And what it doesn't mean is taking the law into your own hands. And so what we would hope to learn is what we can do if we're confronted by situations of homelessness that we don't know how to deal with.
So who would talk about that? Who would talk about that?
Whoever.
Would you have someone
This
in
is-
mind?
Well, on the February meeting, Marty Stockton, who was here, is working on the 82nd project. And she expressed an interest in talking about that in February. If we have
Okay.
time. It'd be well, there's two ways it could go. We could also just do it at a land use meeting, if we don't want to do a general meeting.
Since we just had a presentation on the status of that, is that something different that you'd be talking about?
Honestly, there would be some overlap. She'd be able to go into more detail as to what the city is doing.
She would be talking about, let's see, what did she say? What was it called? Oh, the study, 82nd Avenue study.
Yeah.
Did she indicate how much time?
Can I, so, Roger's here waiting patiently. I'd like to include him in one of either our February or March meetings.
Okay, general meeting or the board?
I only want to talk to the board, and I only want to talk for 45 seconds.
Okay.
That's why I thought you should just talk.
Okay,
We did.
so, why don't we So let's hear what you have to say, and,
Oh, I'm sorry, but is that all right?
oh, yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
So, away from this board and away from the Montebello neighborhood, the Mount Tabor neighborhood board. Those are two boards that are important to us, but this is activity that happens away from you. We raise $24,000 or so each year and put on 4 concerts outdoors in the parks. Have either of you ever been to Berrydale Park or Mount Tabor Park and gone to concerts? So there are free concerts there, and the city parks provides about $1,000 for each event. I think it's in waiving fees and providing insurance, but that's their involvement. And then they have local people like myself and 4 other individuals go out and solicit that money from businesses. But it's all done away from you. So here's the problem. The relationship between the Portland Parks and the people raising the money has evolved over time. And now they're expecting an institution like yours to be actually doing the raising of money and not just a bunch of parks volunteers. Now, we're not mad at them. We think they're very good and they're good at running it, but their expectations are different now than they were. So I wanted you to know that I'm not going to do any fundraising this year unless there's some leadership from some institution. Now, I can go and give this same 45-second talk at Mount Tabor and see what they say, but I didn't know if anyone here knew anybody on the Mount Tabor board.
No, personally, I don't.
Sure.
Met a couple of them. Is this something that can be done with an umbrella organization like Southeast Uplift, which is an amalgamation of neighborhood associations?
I talked to them today about what I was going to say to you tonight, because I wanted to standardize my language, so when I talk to each board, it's the same message. And what I talked to them about was whether you would do a fiscal sponsorship project that would include $100 that I would raise, that would go into Southeast Uplift's fund, and that you would distribute. And I would use that $100 to print up those flyers that I gave you copies of, because I have to pay for this out of pocket now. So, and I also get some of this for that. And they discounted it at FedEx, so we get a pretty good deal, I think. And my next door neighbor across the street does the design of it. And you can see your mention on there. So on Southeast Uplift, here's my final comment. Southeast Uplift, they said you could do it 2 ways. You could do it that way where they handle the money and I collected it from the businesses. Or you could do it another way. You could use, because it's $100, you could use your communications budget. Because you can see on that flyer that you're mentioned. So this is an activity you're kind of sponsoring. And it's at the end of the summer at Montebello Park. Last year was Paddington 2. I let the people at the daycare at Montebello Park pick the movie. So it's usually about like Paddington 2 or Zootopia. That was a prior one. It's a fun event, but it's at the very end of the summer because we'd like to have an early movie start because these are kids.
Sure.
So, so that's my 45 seconds. I'm done with concerts, and I have 4 other people that would take some leadership if somebody wanted to interact with the parks on our behalf. So in other words, I kind of have a committee, but I don't have any leadership because I don't have, I mean, you can see we've been casual. And I think some people that would, over at the other board, would also, you know, maybe have to participate in raising the money.
So, are you looking to us to provide that leadership, or?
Yes.
Okay. Because I know we've been sponsors.
This is the type of thing you could talk about in February if you'd like. But I wanted you to know I'm out on that event. I would like to get $100 from the Montebello movie, and I wondered if you could decide between having me collect it from the businesses or using your communication funds as Southeast described you could. How do you feel about putting $100 into printing like you're looking at? We walk door to door and put these on the flyer on the doors of the people around. I get, you know, 600 or 700 of them. And I have friends, so we just walk around and put little flyers and people come to the park.
So you're saying you're pulling out of the concert business and you're working primarily on movies?
Movies only, one movie,
Okay.
Montville Park.
Okay. Any thoughts?
So the motion I'd ask you to make is whether to go communication funds and just plan to write me $100 check at some point, or let me raise the $100 and then you'd set up what they call a fiscal sponsorship project with Southeast Uplifting. I'd raise the money.
When do you need to know by?
Well, if you could decide, I mean, I was gonna collect the money tomorrow from the businesses, so
Okay.
it'd be handy to know tonight if you have a hunch. Two good systems. I mean, there's nothing wrong with either choice, but if I could get a choice from you, then I would act appropriately.
Well, since he's already got the contacts and sounds like a commitment for the $100, why don't we go that route where he
That
collects
sounds
the
like a motion to me.
$100? I'll move that we have him do the $100 and then do the Southeast.
Fiscal sponsorship project.
Yeah.
And I'll help set that up. Don't worry about the mechanics, if you don't mind delegating me. She told me to call Gabby tomorrow at extension 316 and tell her about your motion tonight.
Sure. So one of them is we donate the $100 and the other is we set up say it
A
again?
fiscal sponsorship project. It's a little category within their 501(c) designation that you have control over. I'm gonna put $100 in there, and you're gonna someday write me a check to FedEx for that.
So we'd be acting as a fiscal sponsor.
It allows the business to get tax deduct the money. That's what's going on. It's a 503(c).
Yeah.
We're 503(c) too.
It actually isn't true, but Southeast Uplift is, and they give you the ability to do a fiscal sponsorship.
Or it's one of the few exceptions.
Physical
we are 501(c).
We are
Sorry.
physical
Ask
sponsorship
Southeast Uplift.
Yeah, like.
project.
Um,
Okay. I move that.
Sorry,
Oh, wait, there's a motion.
I already moved that we go with.
Oh,
him,
let me raise it. We'll
him
use this
doing
sponsorship.
and doing the physical
I-
sponsorship.
Yeah, second.
second.
Thanks.
Third?
Get it in the minutes so she can read it, because I'm gonna tell her that you did this.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So this is where we got Montevilla movie, printing costs, physical sponsorship project. You kind of have to say it that way, because that's the way they call it. I want to make sure my language was right to you. Okay, good, thank you. So if you knew somebody over at Mount Tabor neighborhood, Dylan, did you say you knew somebody over there?
I've met people over there.
Can I use your name? I want to try to meet some people over there so that, because we're distant from them, like we are from you. I have to come in as a stranger and say, hi, we raise money and put your things in your park, but we're not going to do it anymore. And then see what they say, right?
Yeah, you're welcome to. I don't know how far it's going to get you.
What's your last name?
Panboom.
T-A-N?
Yeah, P-E-E.
Oh, P-E-N.
R-E-N-B-O-O-M.
N-B-O-O-N. Okay, thanks. And who is it that you think you met?
Honestly, can't recall his name. I met two of their representatives of the last.
Was that officers or anything, or?
Yeah, they're both on the board.
But not necessarily officers.
Not necessarily officers.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Sorry it takes so long.
No,
That's quite all right. And sorry, the name of the organization for fiscal sponsorship, the Montevilla movie?
Southeast Uplift.
Oh, I got Southeast Uplift.
Okay, so it's a Montevilla Park movie.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. You're good sports to do this. Thank you. I don't know if anyone's thank you tonight. Did any of it thank you?
We do have.
No.
We can appreciate it.
Yeah. I sat in those chairs.
Have a good night.
Good night. See you in February if you ask me.
Okay.
But I only want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to the whole group.
Okay.
Thanks.
We'll put that down on the board.
Okay, yeah, I got my stuff in the minutes.
Okay, so do we have anything else for the document? I'm not sure what we're doing.
Well, tell you what, I will contact somebody about crime prevention.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you asked me to contact whoever the first person was, and she referred me to Terry Papino, and so I'm in contact with her.
Okay.
She's
Well,
with she's Crime Prevention Coordinator, East Crime Prevention Office of Community and Civic Life.
well, as long as it's something that they have their presentations created, they are experts in this, and it's something that our group, our members can use, then I think it's good, whatever it is.
I don't know what
Patricia, I locked the door. This door's locked.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I asked her to talk about things like crimes. I mean, I suggested this if people were interested in things like crime statistics and homelessness issues.
Mhm. Well, let's find out what they're available to do.
She's available in February.
Okay.
Let's
And
do it.
if there's something else we wanted to talk about, I can
Right.
communicate with her and see if she can do it.
Okay. Great.
But it's sort of under the rubric of crime prevention.
Well, that's her title, Crime Prevention Coordinator.
That'll be a safe bet then.
Do you
I read it over your shoulder.
Okay.
see better?
And
Do you want anybody
how much
else?
time do you think that she needs?
I don't know.
30 minutes, maybe?
I would think so.
Okay, so
But
make
but
it
she
so-
didn't really give me a time.
So half of the meeting. So we'll have 10 minutes of introductions, crime prevention coordinator, and then maybe something else. And,
Yeah, is there anything else?
well, we were gonna talk about SMART.
Oh, right.
You wanna invite them?
No, I'll let you know.
I'll invite.
You did mention that before.
What does SMART stand for?
Something about make a reader, something.
Oh, that's right.
It's
yeah,
reading
yeah,
to
yeah.
children.
Helping people read.
Start making a reader today.
All right, so February is those two things.
And-
So you'll finish up the contact with the crime prevention, and I will call SMART people.
So, I mean, what I told her I'd get back to her about is whether she should not come then and try to get this Jonathan Lewis from one point of contact office. But we don't know if he's available, so I think that going ahead with her makes sense, and then maybe he's, we can have it at a later time.
I wanna go ahead with the crime prevention.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So that, and then SMART, that should do it.
I think we should lead with SMART on the agenda. I could see, lead with SMART, start the meeting with SMART, and then go to crime prevention, because.
I can see a lot more questions coming from the body for the crime prevention.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the SMART could be
So SMART would be like
reasonably-
the opening act.
And it could be
Yeah.
reasonably short, probably. It should
Yeah.
be fairly easy to explain.
Get everyone in a good mood.
So what, maybe 15 minutes for that?
Yeah.
And then the remainder for the crime prevention.
Exactly. And then any board questions, things that we need to discuss,
Well, I
we
just,
can email each other about.
Did you have something?
yeah, I do. What I wanted to get in the minutes is that Ron offered to pick up the mail at Southeast Outlet, so that we have a designated person.
Okay, yeah.
You're on.
Thrasher.
Go down there and stop at a coffee shop on the way back. Just make it move.
I'll tell you what, by 9 o'clock I've had more coffee than what I need.
We're
Yeah.
gonna put that in the minutes first.
Okay.
No, that doesn't mean.
Yeah.
We got that in the minutes as well then.
Yeah, so, so for the board, we're
So
gonna
do I
talk
need to go
about.
do that once a week, or how
I
often
wouldn't
is it?
think so.
So, like pick it up the week prior to the board meeting?
Yeah.
Every other week would probably deal.
Yeah.
Because we are gonna get time-sensitive notifications about development in
Okay.
the neighborhood.
We probably have things in there that
I
make our
expect- I
hair
see a bunch of
stand on
stuff
end.
from the IRS, so maybe
Yeah,
that's something.
yeah.
So,
So-
how many weeks accumulation do you think that
2 months.
So, board, we will either have to address the on point or it'll be a moot issue. And then we will talk about the budget. And I will come up with a budget projection for the rest of the year. We can either do it, you know, because we're not bound to stick with the fiscal year. But, you know, but we do have to make a report at the end of this year.
We have to run nominations if applicable.
Right.
Nominations if applicable.
And then reaches out.
And, boy, we have a crowd tonight. Michael Sunleitner is still tentative, so we really can't count on him right now. He wants to be. He said that he is there if, you know, if I have any questions, I need to consult him. Do you know who he is? Okay. He's the guy that came in late, had it on a blue windbreaker, kind of a Santa Claus.
Oh, okay, the guy that's,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. He's been on prior boards
Okay.
and probably been through more, you know, slack and flack than you or I want to deal with.
What about posting the questions for potential board members?
I put that in our earlier discussion.
Okay,
Yeah, and
so we need to remember. And we
so
can always
those,
get that from
we're gonna
Amanda.
take those directly from the questions that are already out there for the candidates.
Yeah.
Um, Sounds wonderful. Was there other stuff? You mentioned something. Last year, we donated money to Franklin in January. You can do that next month. High school is a foundation.
Okay. I would like some information about, you know, not just we want money, but what are they looking for?
Sure,
And,
sure.
you know, did they make a formal request?
Oh, yeah.
Other than just for the money? I mean, have they said purposes, they've got purposes?
Well, all schools need money, right? Maybe it's for manned equipment,
Well,
sports
since we aren't
equipment.
giving it to anybody, any other school, it would be nice to know something about it.
Sure, I don't see, I'm not contesting that. You know, I kind of go off this grid of, well, you know, MNA did that before, so, you know, maybe we could do it again. You know, we haven't done car washes, so. Anyone wants to do car washes? No?
Should we move a motion to adjourn?
I motion.
Well, I moved that we adjourn.
All right, I seconded it. I moved, so. All right, please. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.